Jiri turuli mangelen fo aladoni. Ka sinzanke ala, ka son, sogoma, ani wula, no olute, jiri turulen besa. Aoniche Audanse. Welcome to another episode of Kuma bakolo, the essence of talk, the show where we look at Mandang words from the real world and try to analyze and understand them. This is a project from Ankata, my initiative to create media and resources for speaking and learning Mandang. If you're new here, think about subscribing. Netoko Kolman, Noye Adamajaloye Farafina. Iowa. I already read the headline, so let's jump into it. Ankata. Iowa. So today's text is actually not a headline, but rather an excerpt, and it's not from a modern newspaper, but actually from a very old issue. It's from the newspaper Kibaru, which is a newspaper printed out of Mali, which has been financed by the government for the last few decades. And we're going to be looking at an excerpt from issue 90, which was published in 1979. So we're going to take this section down here. You can see there's a headline that says Jiru Ani Dantanfeum Matarafali, which means the proper upkeep of trees and animals. But we're actually not going to focus on that headline, but rather this particular segment of the section. You can see there's a picture with looks like a tree behind a little fence. So I've actually already thrown this text into a document. So here it is. Oko. Jiritululi mangelen fo aladoni ka sinsanke ala ka son sogoma aniwula no lute jiritulembesa. So you can see, actually one thing that I need to fix, this is the original writing, and you can see there was no capital as it was originally written, but I already switched it up myself. Just know that in early Bambara texts there sometimes is no capitalization, and that was just part of a historical debate of how things should be written. If you see it though, you can throw it in. That's what I've done here. Iowa. So jirituruli mangelen fo aladoni. Let's look at this first clause. So first we have the word gelen. I think a lot of people recognize gelen. Inafo bamanakam mangelen. So Bambara isn't difficult. So this is a word that a lot of new students know, but we normally see it written a different way. So gelen is normally written like that, means difficult, and I'm going to change it in here. But we should take note that this actually is something that has occurred with in this text throughout, is that there's a use of accents to signal something else. So we have E with a grave accent, which is going to mean this, and then we also have another form, which is going to be O, written like, well, actually they do it with a circumflex, but sometimes you'll see this in historical texts also written like this, and both of these will mean this today. Iowa. So I'll correct them as we go, but just keep that in mind. So jiri turuli mangelen fo aladoni. So something isn't difficult. So we have mang, right? This gelen is our qualitative verb. Mang is saying like amang gelen, it isn't difficult. And what's our subject? Jiri turuli. So jiri koroko, tree. You also can hear this pronounced by a lot of people as yiri, ne fana ne ba fo tang. So I also say it that way. So jiri turuli comes from katuru. Katuru or katutu means to plant something. So katuruli, this li here is going to be a nominalization marker. So it means an act of planting. So our subject is jiri turuli mangele. So the planting of a tree isn't hard. And then let's look at this next segment. Fo aladoni. So fo here is going to mean something like except. And then we have aladoni. So here is being he, she, or it. I'll put an accent on it just to distinguish it from you all plural. And so this is going to refer back to jirituruli. So jirituruli mangele, it isn't difficult except it's, right? So it's being the jirituruli ladoni. Ladoni, akorokodi, okoroko ka ladon. Ka ladon means to maintain something, right? So if we say ladoni, this is another nominalization mark, which has turned this into something like maintenance. So the planting of a tree isn't hard except for its maintenance. And then we have a colon here, which is going to signal a list. Ka sinsan ke ala. So sinsan, or korokodi, sinsan here, it means like an enclosure or a fence, right? So enclosure. ka sinsan ke ala. So here we have the verb ke, which we probably normally recognize like this, which means to do. But when we have it as this expression, ka ke something la, is actually to put something on blank, right? So la here is going to be like on, ka something, ke blank la, to put something on blank. So ka sinsan ke ala would mean to put a fence on it or around it, is the idea here in English. We would say around. So planting a tree isn't difficult except for its maintenance. Putting a fence around it, or to put a fence around it, ka son sogoma aniwula. So I think everyone here recognizes sogoma, aniwula, sogoma, inafo, ini sogoma, so the morning, and aniwula, meaning the afternoon. Ka ason, so okorokodi. So ka son, here in this case, it's going to mean to water something, right? To water something. And it has a range of meanings, though. You can also hear it in other sentences. But here, let's just translate it as to water something. So to water it morning and night. And notice here that we have the word ani. We also know the word ni meaning and, but ani is typically used as the last word if you're connecting a list. So you could say, kolman ni musa ani sita. Coleman and Musa and Sita. But notice I said Kolman ni Musa ani Sita. If you only have two things, though, you can jump straight into ani. And this literally comes from a plus ni. So it just means it and, right? Aiwa. So, jirituruli mangelen fo aladoni ka sinsanke ala, and I'm going to put the verbs in bold. So planting a tree isn't difficult except for its upkeep, putting a fence around it, and watering it morning and night. And then we have a next sentence. No lute. So ni meaning if, ni olute. So if these are not. So te here is going to be our copula of existence, right? So herebe, there is peace. Herete, there isn't peace. Peace does not exist. So no lute is going to say if these things don't exist, and that's because we have o, which means this, and if we make it plural, it's olu. So that would be like those, right? So this olu is referring back to everything that we just discussed. It's referring back to ka sinsan ke ala ani ka son sogoma ani wula. So if these acts of maintenance do not exist or don't take place, jiri turulem besa. Aiwa, kasa okoroko di namba foko kasa okoroko to die. And then we have what? Jiri turulem besa. So a tree dies, but a turulen tree. So turu, right, we've already seen can mean to plant, but turulen, right, is going to be a planted tree. So this is like the resultative suffix, right? So it's a participle, and it lines up a little bit like with what we have in English with ed. So if we put this all together, jiri turuli mangelen fo aladoni. Ka sinsanke ala, ka son, sogoma, aniwula. No lute, jiri turulembesa. The planting of a tree is not difficult except for its maintenance, putting fencing on it, watering it in the morning and the afternoon. Without these things, so if these things do not exist, a planted tree dies. Aiwa, nala sona video ni jara auye. Hopefully you like this video. If so, auka jija kake patrons di, or auka jija kake patron ye. So I hope that you guys will make an effort and become patrons or think about subscribing. Nala sona menaseka video were ke auye. Aiwa, alaka wati wera ira anna tambe aunite.